Okay, we are live on Facebook, and to everyone who's joining live or watching or record, it's super to have you. This is Inspo's Road to New Normal Conversations. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Ronan Kealy, a.k.a. junior brother, join me for a little bit of a chat. Before we bring Ronan in, I guess really just to give a little bit of context as to what these conversations are. So first and foremost, they've been brought to you by me, John Slattery, and my business Inspo. And the goal of Inspo is to inspire and motivate the human spirit. One of the goals for me and the business, once the coronavirus arrived on our shores, was to see how I could support people to hit the ground running when we arrive at this new normal. And with that in mind, I thought what would be great is to speak to people in the public domain about their experience, because ultimately I'd love people to have, open, healthy conversations about how they found life in lockdown, what they're looking forward to and apprehensive about in terms of new normal. It's a very healthy thing to chat that we've never been here before. So it's lovely, I think, for us to do, to have chats. And it's just a real privilege and a pleasure for me then to have the honor to be speaking to the likes of you, Ronan. So first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time.
No bother. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I have to maybe just share the first time I came across you performing was last year, almost to not far off to the day in Altogether Now. It was a rainy Sunday, and myself and my sister took refuge in the RTE tent, and we struck goals, to be honest, because we had Bryce Desner in conversation with John Kelly. And Bryce Desner, for those of you who don't know, is a member of the band The National. And it was just interesting. I learned a lot about him that I didn't know, and that he composes a lot of music. So the breadth of his music knowledge is huge. And then yourself, Ronan, was asked to play a couple of songs, around that. And I remember I think you kicked off with perhaps it was either Hungover at Mass or The Back of Her. And I remember actually just watching Bryce Desner as you played, and here's a man who's seen the world of music, and yet I got a real sense from looking at him, watching you, that he must have been thinking to himself, this is a different sound, this is quite unique. That was certainly my take anyway, in terms of watching him and you play, because your voice is unique, your sound is very unique. And although we're here to talk about your experience in lockdown and what you're looking forward to and apprehensive about in terms of going forward, one question I really wanted to ask you from a music perspective, Ronan, was how much has your voice always been that way? Is this a wonderful range of sound, or how much have you explored as you've kind of gone through the years as a musician to evolve it to that way?
Well, for a long time with my voice, I didn't feel like I found my voice at all. I didn't think I could sing for ages. And so I sang a bit, but I didn't really sing. And it was only kind of when I was about 16 or 17 and started getting into the way I play now, the guitar and everything else, that I just kind of started singing like that, just due to, I think, combination of things I was listening to, but also it was just a way that I could sing and just express myself. It was just a way I could it was just the way I sound is just the way I managed to be able to sing through. It's kind of hard to explain. It's like I felt I couldn't sing for ages because the only way I could sing was to sing weirdly, and I didn't realize that was my voice until I was around that age, like 16, 17. And as soon as I felt comfortable enough singing like that, I was away with it then. So took me a while to kind of realize it was the way I needed to sing, and it was it just felt right then, and that's the best explanation I can give, really. I didn't think about it too much, really. I just what started coming out, and it was a culmination of different singers I would have been listening to at the time, probably, as well.
And who would have been I'll come back, there's a question I'd love to ask around that, but who would have been the music or the singers that was influencing the shape that you were taking with your own style?
I mean, Andy Irvine, Joanna Newsom, kind of Peter Gabriel era Genesis as well. And a few, I can't think of what else. Those would have been the main ones, yeah. Probably a combination of kind of those three and a couple of other things as well. Just kind of, yeah, getting a Johnny Moynihan's voice as well, kind of higher pitched, like Irish folk voices and female voices to an extent, kind of, yeah. But the main influence probably Joanna Newsom and Andy Irvine, probably the two main things that I was listening to the most at the time.
And there's one question, Ron, that I'd love to ask, because you know, you mentioned about like accepting that was your voice and that's who you were and that's how you had to sing. And you know, before we get into maybe the experience in terms of like the lockdown, it's a great place in life where one can just accept, you know, who you are, whether it be musically or otherwise. Like, as you said, you know, it is a unique sound that you have. How easy was it to just accept, you know, this is who I am? This is, you know, me as Ronan Kealy playing his junior brother. This is my voice. How easy was that acceptance?
I suppose I couldn't have accepted it if it wasn't for, you know, people who had blazed the trail already. Like, that's Joanna Newsom would have been a big one for me in that sense, because she really got so much flack at the start for her voice, and she just didn't care. It was just the way she sang, and I could relate to that massively. So if it wasn't for people like that, I'm not sure how quickly I would have accepted my voice and how quickly I would have started singing. So you really have to thank the Trailblazers, you know, for cutting away the undergrowth first and creating the path for other people to follow, you know.
Yeah, and absolutely, I would say there's probably people watching this who regard you as a trailblazer for them, and I suppose it's that continuous cycle, perhaps. Okay, look, I'm sure music is going to come up between now and we finish around 6:30 again. But like I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but just having a small look at on the Facebook page, you know, it looked like that you had a busy January and February. Like you were gigging a fair bit. You'd had the shortlist nominee for the album as well, for the album of the year 2019. So, you know, it seemed to be like if you could kind of write starts to the year, it certainly seemed like it was a fairly good start. And then, so this lands in like and you know, March 29th, Leo says you know, that we're going into a lockdown. So I suppose how did that news land to you, both as a musician and as a person?
Well, it was obviously a big shock to everyone. Like as a person, it was just like, Jesus. Took like a while to come to the senses, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like, but I was lucky that like the big cluster of busyness all happened together, kind of in the first 2 months, like January and February, and then of course the end of February things started kind of locking down then. But so yeah, like I was in a way luckier than some, because I was kind of able to tour the first album to the end of the planned sequence of, you know, runs. Because I had my first like headline UK tour, and literally I had just come back from that, and I'm working on the next record at the moment. So I was on the way up to Newry to the studio, and heard that like St. Patrick's Day was cancelled, and I was like, what? That was when it kind of hit me then. And I had one gig right before the lockdown happened in Belfast that still went ahead. And this was when I was getting news like on my phone of all sorts of things being locked down, or, you know, down home in Kerry and in Dublin and stuff. And I just tried to get as much as I could done in the studio then after the gig, and just legged it back home to Kerry then. So there was like the big cluster of busyness, the big massive gigs had just happened. So it was just when that had ended that it came along. So it wasn't too bad for me, really.
Yeah.
There's been a lot that's been, of course, postponed and cancelled. A lot of gigs kind of since the lockdown, of course, and it's still all up very much up in the air. But it came kind of at the right time, really, in hindsight, in a way, as tough as it's kind of been in other ways.
Yeah.
Because I probably definitely needed a break. Like, it was fairly hectic right before it happened for me, like, so. And I hadn't been down home in Kerry in ages either, so I was able to go down there for, you know, a couple of months, like, which I haven't been able to do in ages. So yeah, I was lucky enough in some ways, kind of selfishly, when it hit for me. But you know, other gigs were also postponed after that too, so it wasn't perfect. And it's also a global pandemic, so it's not it's no happy days really, you know.
Because it's interesting, I'm hearing like on two sides. One, like, you know, it came at the right side, because like, you know, you did a huge amount of gigging there in January, February, and obviously congrats, like, in terms of, like, you know, you're headlining, you know, headlining the UK. And then you said it was tough then in other ways. I suppose looking at the good and the challenging from the lockdown experience, being there back at home in Kerry, like, I guess first focusing on the good. What would you sum up as the good of that time, you know, that you had down there during lockdown?
Just got to know, like, the landscape of where I'm from better in a more physical sense. Did loads of walking, lots and lots of walking where I would have got lost and things like that. And of course, that was when the kind of 2K radius moved outwards a little bit more. But yeah, I just did a lot of kind of like being kind of at one with the kind of being at one with the landscape of where I'm from, because it's always been very influential in my music anyway, but always in a more imagined sense, like in a more kind of romanticized sense. The kind of like the landscape of home from someone who's away from home. So I got to know the landscape of home from someone who's at home, you know. So that was massively nourishing, like. So that was the good. The bad, of course, is that I live in an area where if you can't drive, you're stuck in your house. So I hadn't been home in so long that I don't have a car anymore. So I learned, I learned to kind of be by myself a lot, but I also spent a lot of time with my parents as well, which is lovely. And the only thing was, to go anywhere, I couldn't leave the house really, like. So anywhere I was going for like 2.5, 3 months, I had to go with one of my parents. So it was a bit like being 12 again, you know, or something. You know, going to do the shopping with mom just to get out of the house, like, you know. That's a good thing too, but it also, after a while, you know, it gets a bit like, geez, I'd love to hop on a Dublin bus now and just go and get a loaf of bread or something, you know. And also, like, my life is up in Dublin now as well. So, like, you know, after like 2 months, 2.5 months, you know, you start to miss things that are up here. So that was less good than the other things, and that made me eager to kind of move back up then, which I was able to do when restrictions lifted.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We had a similar, like, I went home to Wicklow Town to the folks, and, you know, a couple of my buddies were still up here in Dublin where I came back to too. And I think the phrase "fear of missing out" was something that was hitting me, like, you know, I don't know how much now that lands for you at all, but just that, like, like, what's happening up there? What am I missing?
Yeah, 100%. But like, obviously with no gigs, I didn't have it too badly, you know. If there was a sense that I myself was missing out on gigs, I'd have a massive fear of missing out. Or if I couldn't do a gig or something, there was no work at all happening, you know. So that made me not feel that so much. But I definitely did feel that in the way that, like, at the start of the year, I moved into my new gaff here in Dublin, and as soon as I moved in, I was away on tour then for a month or so, and then kind of as soon as I got back from the tour, the lockdown happened, and I came straight down to Kerry. So I'm only really kind of getting to know my house now after 7 months, you know. So there was kind of a slight fear of missing out the crack, like, in the house, you know, because my mates live in the house as well, like, and you know, a couple of my friends live down the road, and
Yeah.
they'd be, you know, having sneaky cans outside and stuff as things were moving on.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of that, all right, but kind of the first, I'd say, a month and a half, 2 months were fairly enjoyable now, I must say, in general.
Yeah. And then I suppose, you know, now being back up in Dublin, you know, as we start to move forward into what we call new normal, first and foremost, what are you excited about?
Geez. Like, I'd like to say I'm excited about things going back to normal, but it's hard to know how long that will be, how many years, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, there's a real uncertainty, I suppose. I suppose as things kind of, as the kind of lockdown or whatever is winding down, yeah, just for to be able to see everyone I know, I suppose, and not feel like you're breaking any rules, seeing friends or enjoying yourself, or, you know, things like that. But again, from a selfish point of view, I'd be excited about when gigs will start, to be able to go to them as much as play them, you know. In whatever format that will take in the next few months we've yet to see. With the drive-in gigs there being cancelled, I heard that it's fairly like hard to know what will happen, you know, in the coming while. So, having said that, I'd be excited for that stuff to kind of come back into this new normal in a bit more of a familiar way, you know.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think we're all craving a small bit of just what we had.
Yeah,
you know,
it feels a bit like sometimes blind optimism as well, thinking like, oh, things will be back now soon, and everything will be like the way it was soon.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can feel like, you know, you're just blinding yourself from the kind of
The
just from the
realities.
the realities, like, and the uncertainty of the reality, you know.
Yeah.
Which is a way of getting through it as well, you know. It's fine to be like that, you know, but and things are so uncertain anyway that it's a understandable way of feeling too, you know.
Well, and that's a good, maybe something that would be interesting to get your perspective on, please, Ron, because, like, look, we're all having to live with uncertainty, you know.
Yeah.
Me working for myself, you know, the traditional work kind of, you know, fell off hugely, and you're left with the uncertainty of where you build it up. Yet there's the uncertainty of, like, how we can live in COVID-19.
Yeah.
What helps you to live well with the uncertainty, or as well as you can?
Yeah, I suppose just if you've a day where you're doing nothing, to do something and kind of try to structure it. For me personally, this is a time to just put the head down and work on the next record. Which I did, like, all down lockdown, down home. I was working on arrangements, doing demos. Could not write a new song for the life of me, which was a strange thing.
How come?
Couldn't create at all. I don't know why. Just couldn't create. Which, you know, I selfishly again put my hands together on the way down to Kerry, thinking I'll write loads of stuff now. I have nothing else to do. Couldn't do a tap. I've heard a lot of kind of creative people saying that, strangely enough, actually.
Right.
So it's I don't know why that is, but not an uncommon thing apparently. No, not the same for everyone, but for me, I couldn't do a tap, so I just focused on the new stuff, just chipping away at arrangements and demoing songs from the next album. So at the moment, I'm just getting through this uncertainty by just preparing for the next thing, for when we're out of the hole, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And so the excitement's about trying to get back to the familiar. You're dealing with the uncertainty by just preparing on the next thing and focusing on that, which sounds like a very good thing to do. What about, say, maybe then apprehensions around where we're going for you? either personally or as a musician? I'd actually genuinely be interested in your personal perspective on that. Apprehensions about where we're headed.
Suppose the main apprehension I'd have, I suppose, is behavioural, like from you know, people, we're social, you know, animals and everything else, and when something comes along and changes the pattern of how we interact with each other in a sort of a negative way, I'd like to hope that psychologically that doesn't last beyond this period.
Yeah.
I don't believe it will last. I think, but again, it's hard to be certain still at the moment, you know, about any of this stuff. That's the main apprehension I'd have anyway. Like, you know, not being able to hug your friend that you haven't seen in ages, or, you know, not being able to shake hands. You know, being paranoid about being in enclosed spaces and stuff like that. That stuff is, especially for children as well, growing up, you know, you'd hope that that's not something that, you know, lasts into adulthood, you know. So, like, psychologically, I'd have slight concerns, but again, I'm optimistic mainly, and I think it's up to each individual.